What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Stephen Fulton, 20 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBC and WBO Super-Bantamweight, that's 122 pounds, titles against Danny Roman. 29 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. This is a division where there are 2 belts held by Stephen Fulton. He holds a WBC and WBO belt, and the other 2 belts are held by MJ Akhmadaliev. He holds the WBA and IBF belts, which he recently won against Danny Roman. And this 122-pound division, I would say in the past several years, the person who pretty much was seen to be the best of the division, we'll say like the mid 2010s, like 2013 to 2016, 2017, would be Guillermo Rigondeaux out of Cuba, and Ray Vargas was also a longtime belt holder. So Ray Vargas held the WBC belt through several title defenses, and Guillermo Rigondeaux held like 1 to 2 of the other belts for several years. And this is also the division where if Naoya the Monster Inoue beats Nonito Donaire in the rematch, Inoue is likely to go up from bantamweight to this division, 122 super bantamweight. So Stephen Fulton, pretty young fighter, only 27 years old, turned pro in 2014, and then he started to have like step-up opponents, and then he had one significant step-up opponent with Isaac Avalar, and this was in August of 2019. This was kind of seen to be a nearly even fight, even though Stephen Fulton was a significant favorite. A lot of people had Avalar on their radar. His name was Canelito, like Canelo being cinnamon, redhead. Avalar also had red hair. They called him Canelito. And in this fight, the first couple rounds were pretty interesting, and then Stephen Fulton took control, ended up stopping Avalar in the 6th round with the body punch. I remember Boom Boom Mancini, he was one of the people on the call, as was Austin No Doubt Trout. Austin Trout was basically saying that Stephen Fulton was winning the rounds because he was outboxing Avalar, and then Boom Boom Mancini, probably staying true to his own fight style, was saying that Avalar was the one who was kind of taking over and coming on because he was like the aggressor, kind of backing Stephen Fulton up, and Stephen Fulton was at range looking for the nice clean shots from distance. So this was a big step-up stoppage win for Stephen Fulton, and then he ended up winning his next fight via unanimous decision against Arnold Kegai, and he beat him at the Barclays Center, and that fight put Stephen Fulton in position to fight for Angelo Leo's WBO Super Bantamweight title. So this was a big deal. They had tried to schedule this fight in 2020 in that COVID 2020, and then it was postponed and then later rescheduled to January 2021. So Angelo Leo and Stephen Fulton finally got it on in the beginning of 2021, and this was a very interesting fight in that Stephen Fulton usually controls range very well. Very good fighter, Philadelphia fighter, so he actually has a mixture of a lot of at-range boxing, but he could also mix it up in tight quarters, and this was fully on display and evident against Angelo Leo. So going into this fight, people thought that it was going to be Stephen Fulton who's trying to keep things at distance, and it would be Angelo Leo that's crashing the pocket, trying to make it an in-close phone booth style fight. Well, to a lot of the spectators and announcing teams' surprise, Stephen Fulton was happy to oblige Angelo Leo in close quarters and actually outworked him in close range. So it was a mixture of they would break, and then Stephen Fulton would, jab him from the outside, landing clean shots, and then they would go into the trenches, and Stephen Fulton would also ultimately outwork Angelo Leo in tight. So this fight actually changed the perception of people's idea of Stephen Fulton's style. So Cool Boy Steph basically outlanded Angelo Leo by almost 100 punches in their matchup. And while a lot of these rounds did seem super competitive because Angelo Leo was landing a lot of his shots as well, and Stephen Fulton does take a lot of punishment, especially in these last 2 fights for him. But the judges actually had this fight 118 to 110. 2 of the judges scored it 118 to 110, and then the 3rd judge actually had it 119 to 109. That's like 11 rounds to 1. So he dominated on the judges' scorecards. And to be honest, I thought that the lopsided nature of the scorecards was a little more lopsided than I was seeing watching the fight. I thought maybe, 8 rounds to 4, 9 rounds to 3, something like that. I thought Angelo Leo was a little more competitive than those scorecards indicated. But again, you could win the rounds and win each round closely to where each round might be a competitive round. But if they give that round to you and they consistently keep giving you those close rounds, or at least competitive, but maybe somewhat clear rounds, you could still cruise to a wide margin of victory on the scorecards. So yeah, Angelo Leo was pretty stunned that Stephen Fulton obliged and was willing to fight him in tight quarters, and again, outworked him by going to the body, mixing up the attack high and low. And Stephen Fulton rolls with a lot of shots too, and he's also very good at kind of pinching your arm, your hands with his elbow to kind of hold an arm. It's an illegal tactic, but Stephen Fulton does it very methodically to where if the ref is on one side, he'll kind of do it on the other side. And while he's holding or pinning one of your arms, he'll start getting in close uppercuts into the body and to the head while walking you back into the rope. So that's another thing about Stephen Fulton. You might think that you are the aggressor and you're the stronger fighter in the close quarters, but it's usually Stephen Fulton who's walking his opponents back into the ropes. Optics-wise, I think that goes a long way with the judges as well. And so his next fight was against the WBC Super-Bantamweight champ, Brandon Figueroa. And this was a fight that a lot of people were looking forward to. Brandon Figueroa was coming off of a knockout win against Luis Neri, and he was pretty much rising in popularity because of his fight style. Just somebody who never takes their foot off the gas, always coming forward, just throwing a super high volume of punches. And you know how I said Stephen Fulton outlanded Angelo Leo by almost 100 punches in their fight? Well, Brandon Figueroa outlanded Stephen Fulton when they fought. And this was a case of Stephen Fulton's jab, working to an extent in pockets, but most of this fight was Brandon Figueroa demanding that this fight take place in close quarters. So it seemed like Stephen Fulton was struggling to control range against Figueroa, so then he basically had to just battle head to head, toe to toe for the duration of the fight damn near, to where Stephen Fulton might have won like a couple of the early rounds, but there were so many swing rounds in this fight. It was super difficult to score. Like, I didn't know how to score like maybe 6 rounds in this one. Maybe 6 rounds were somewhat clear, and then the other 6 rounds were total toss-ups. Difficult fight to score. I mean, you had Brandon Figueroa, who was basically, because he's a significantly taller fighter. Stephen Fulton, who will have a height advantage against Daniel Roman, by the way. But Stephen Fulton is about 5'6.5", whereas Brandon Figueroa is 5'8". But even though he was only 1.5 inches taller than Fulton, he looked like he was a good 3 inches taller than Fulton. He seems like he's just draped over his opponents like a blanket, where he's basically hanging over the pocket, and he seems to have a super durable chin too. So no matter what clean shots, and that was what Stephen Fulton was relying on. He's basically thinking, I'm not going to out-volume this guy. This guy just keeps on digging to the body, throwing combinations, and then also when Brandon Figueroa would decide to jab his way into range, it was even that much more difficult to control him. So again, Stephen Fulton trying to box him from the outside, but Brandon Figueroa having none of that, starts jabbing his way into range and then just throwing punches for damn near the entire round. So it was a case where one guy, Figueroa, has the volume, and then Stephen Fulton was landing the cleaner shots where he was like moving Figueroa's head with uppercuts in close range, and then at range, at far range, hitting him with the jab and maybe a 1-2, but before you know it, he would be backed up against the ropes again, and it would just be more of the same, where Brandon Figueroa is just pouring on the volume. So going into the scorecards, it was really anyone's guess who was going to win this one. And Stephen Fulton, much to the audience's, the crowd's chagrin, ended up winning this one via majority decision. So one judge had it a draw, and the other 2 judges actually had it for Stephen Fulton, 116 to 112. That's 8 rounds to 4. I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought maybe this one was going to result in a draw. I could see it going either way, to be honest. Like, I could see Stephen Fulton edging a decision. I could see Brandon Figueroa edging a decision. It was that difficult to call. But for two judges to have it 8-4 for Stephen Fulton, I thought that was interesting. Now, what happened was they gave the first 2 rounds, or first 3 out of 4 rounds to Stephen Fulton. So Brandon Figueroa ended up having to claw his way back into their scorecards by winning several of the middle rounds. And then they gave Stephen Fulton the last 2 rounds. So they had Stephen Fulton finishing the fight strong, which I could see. I could see him winning either one of the last 2 or both of the 11th and 12th rounds at the end of the fight. But still, super close fight nonetheless. And coming out of that fight, Stephen Fulton is looking like a badass. He started to work his way into some people's top 10 pound for pound list. He hasn't yet hit mine. However, if he ends up beating Daniel Roman, and certainly if he ends up fighting Akhmadaliev, the person who holds the other 2 belts, after this, then he would be in my top 10, but not quite yet. Especially because of how close this fight versus Brandon Figueroa was. But still, Stephen Fulton in his last 2 fights gave 2 opponents, Angelo Leo and Brandon Figueroa, their first professional loss. And now he's about to take on Daniel Roman, who basically had to, work his way into title contention. This is one of those guys who just kept on winning and winning, and then for several reasons, like if it wasn't for promotional reasons, and therefore he couldn't get a fight with Guillermo Rigondeaux, or couldn't get a fight against Ray Vargas, he was always on the outside looking in. He was just beating opponent after opponent, basically retaining his lesser titles. He would have the WBA/NABA Super-Bantamweight title through several fights, from 2015 to 2016 and then into 2017. And then after knocking Adam Lopez out in the 9th round in 2017, he finally had a proper major title challenge opportunity against Shun Kubo, who was holding a lesser version of the WBA title. And so he goes to Japan, Kyoto, Japan, to fight Shun Kubo, ends up stopping him in the 9th round to earn a lesser version of the WBA title. And then in his first title defense against Ryo Matsumoto, also in Japan, he beats him via unanimous decision, and then that belt is elevated to the actual WBA Super Bantamweight title, which he then defended another 2 times against Moises Flores and then against Gavin McDonald, beating Moises Flores via unanimous decision and then stopping Gavin McDonald in the 10th round. So his power started to carry late. Very impressive title defense against Gavin McDonald. And then he fights TJ Doheny, or Doheny, who was holding an IBF Super Bantamweight title. And then he ends up beating Doheny via majority decision. This was an interesting fight. Doheny, a southpaw, was landing some clean shots against Daniel Roman. And it was a question of whether Daniel Roman, who was coming forward, kind of a boxer-puncher style, against Doheny, who was fighting on his back foot, was visibly getting busted up, who got dropped early in the fight, and then got dropped late in the fight, like in the 11th round, got dropped to the body. So he suffered multiple knockdowns at the hands of Daniel Roman. And Doheny still came close on the judges' scorecards because several of the middle rounds were truly swing rounds where, again, it was whether you liked Daniel Roman's come forward boxer puncher style, or if you like Doheny's back up, and then land clean punches with your southpaw stance and your left hand. But the judges ultimately gave Daniel Roman the decision over Doheny. So he came out of that fight not only defending his WBA title successfully, but now also picking up the IBF Super Bantamweight title. So then nearly a year later, he fights MJ Akhmadaliev, who was only a few professional fights into his career. He had only 7-8 fights by the time he's challenging Daniel Roman for his belt. And Daniel Roman gave him the title opportunity, but at the same time was thinking, it's really interesting that I had to work and, claw my way, win these lesser belts and everything before fighting for an actual title. And here MJ Akhmadaliev is fighting me for my belts that I had to work this hard to gain. And he's only a few fights into his professional career and has already got a title opportunity. Well, MJ Akhmadaliev ended up winning the early rounds. Daniel Roman ended up battling his way back into the fight. but then Akhmadaliev finished strong, and it was a very interesting stylistic matchup. Akhmadaliev, he's kind of a problem, and he's a pretty good athlete too. A lot of the fighters from like his regions, which is, he's from Uzbekistan, so you've got Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and usually they are more of the Gennady Golovkin or Janibek style, where it's boxer puncher, but more front foot heavy. Maybe you're working behind a jab, but you're looking to land your killer punches. Akhmadaliev has a little bit like of a slicker style than Golovkin or Janibek. He's kind of like a slick defensive fighter who's looking to land clean counter punches against you, and is basically, too athletic for many of his opponents. So very interesting matchup between Akhmadaliev and Danny Roman. Well, Akhmadaliev ended up taking both of those belts from Roman via split decision. And then Roman, now beltless, ended up winning the next two fights after that against Juan Payano, and that was on the Charlo versus Derevianchenko, and then the other Charlo, Jermel, against Jason Rosario undercard. Daniel Roman ended up winning unanimous decision against Juan Payano, and then he fights and beats Ricardo Franco, beats him via 10-round unanimous decision, and now he's got another title opportunity to fight for the other two belts, the two that he didn't previously hold, against Stephen Fulton Jr. So what do I expect between Cool Boy Steph, Stephen Fulton Jr., and Daniel Roman, the former unified title holder? Well, Fulton's got the height advantage, reach advantage. He's got like an 1.5 inch height advantage. He's got a like 2.5 inch reach advantage. He's a few years younger. We've got a 27-year-old against a 32-year-old. And I'm more age conscious when it comes to the lower and lighter weight classes. So Daniel Roman, he's been through a lot in the ring, but Stephen Fulton, especially because of these last two fights against Angelo Leo and against Brandon Figueroa, he's withstood a lot of punishment in the last couple fights. So in his young career, he's been fighting nothing but elite fighters in his last few fights. So it was a fast rise for Stephen Fulton, but he's really had to pay the cost to be the boss in the way that he had to claw his way and dig deep to win those last couple of fights. So I think that Daniel Roman might have more wear and tear, especially when you couple the age. But again, Stephen Fulton, even though he's only 27 years old, because of the fights that he's been having, I don't see him as being as young as his age would indicate. Still, I think that from the outside, he's going to be able to have a success controlling range in the way that he wasn't able to maintain that range control against Brandon Figueroa, who again just refuses to be controlled at distance. He demands for the fight to take place in the phone booth so he can let his 100 punches around go. I think that this one, matchups-wise, is a little bit more favorable for Stephen Fulton, and I think you're going to see more of his work from the outside come into effect against Daniel Roman, who is a very good, well-rounded boxer puncher. Again, he hits pretty hard. He's got a good amount of stoppages. He's got pretty good power in both hands. This is orthodox versus orthodox, but I think that Stephen Fulton's jab is going to be more active than Daniel Roman's jab. But I think Roman's going to be looking to land right-hand counters against Fulton, who does get hit by right hands pretty often. Even when he was fighting Isaac Avalar a few years ago, Stephen Fulton, he's a good defensive fighter in that he rolls with a lot of punches, but he's not one of those make you miss while in the pocket. He eats a lot of punches, and his game plan is to, use his durable chin, which he's proven to have, to then get the angles and the punches that he's looking for and to simply land the more effective shots. But again, he is not risk averse. He does oblige when it comes to fighting in the phone booth, so he is very versatile, and I think that versatility is going to throw Daniel Roman off, because I think that Fulton's going to be outboxing him more or less from the outside. Again, I expect Roman, the babyface assassin, to have some success at range, but not minute by minute over Stephen Fulton. I think Stephen Fulton's going to be winning more of the rounds that have more of the at-range fighting. But I think Stephen Fulton might also have the slight edge in close quarters, even though Daniel Roman, again, has a vicious body attack, which he showed us against TJ Doheny when he picked up the second belt. Rahman's got a nice body attack. I think he's going to try to work Fulton's body when they do get on the inside. And I think that Fulton also needs to be aware of Daniel Rahman's pretty quick left hook. You don't want to get caught cleanly with that thing. Rahman also dropped Dahani with that left hook. But ultimately, I think Stephen Fulton's going to be doing the better work on the inside too. He shoots a beautiful uppercut. He also works the body pretty damn well, even though I think that Brandon Figueroa got the better of the body work between the two, he and Fulton. I think Figueroa outworked Fulton to the body, but I think Fulton's going to be selectively landing the more effective shots inside against Daniel Rahman. So I think that Fulton is going to get off to a good start. Rahman, it took him a while to get going against MJ Akhmadaliev, and I think that set him back on the scorecards. So I know that he's going to want to be cognizant not to start off too slow against Fulton, because if Fulton could bank the early rounds and then make Rahman have to claw his way back in, Fulton has also proven to be a pretty good finisher in the championship rounds. So you don't want to fall back on the scorecard against Fulton. But I think that Fulton is ultimately going to edge more of the rounds that involve, again, a mix of the outside fighting and inside fighting. And again, I think that this is going to have a higher percentage of outside fighting than Fulton's last two fights. But I think that Fulton's going to be able to do more at range with the jab, to where he's going to be able to win more of the clear rounds over Daniel Rahman. And then you're going to obviously have a few of those swing rounds, I believe. I think that this fight will go the distance. I think that Fulton and Rahman have both proven to be durable. And unless Fulton has become a shot fighter somehow, like, we never know, but it's possible that he sustained a ton of damage in Figueroa to where his beard, his chin isn't as good as it was, going into that Figueroa fight. It's possible. But unless Fulton is suddenly a shot fighter, I think he's going to be durable enough to beat Daniel Rahman via unanimous decision. I think it's going to be closer to the Angelo Leo scorecards, but I don't think it's going to be that lopsided. I think that this one is going to be more or less 8 rounds to 4, maybe 9 rounds to 3. One of those 116, 112, 117, 111 types of unanimous decision wins for Stephen Fulton, which, this might be Daniel Rahman's last stand in terms of trying to work his way back into earning titles, because again, he's a former unified 2-belt holder and 32 years old. It's going to be interesting to see if he loses to Fulton, where his career goes from this point. I'm not saying he's a shot fighter or anything, but I mean, there are only so many lanes to getting a title opportunities. And if Stephen Fulton beats Daniel Rahman, I'm assuming that they're going to make something like Stephen Fulton versus MJ Akhmadaliev, hopefully, for all 4 belts. And then maybe Daniel Rahman could fight somebody like Luis Neri or Rais Alim, who's actually one of the lesser belt holders, I believe. So Alim is going to be in line for a mandatory title shot, I'm sure, sometime soon. But we'll see how rigorously the sanctioning bodies enforce those mandatories. Remains to be seen. But yeah, I've got Stephen Fulton beating the Inglewood, California native. We're out of Long Beach. Inglewood, California is only like 15 minutes from here. But yeah, I've got Fulton beating the LA Inglewood native Daniel Rahman via unanimous decision. But yeah, let me know what you think about Stephen Fulton, Cool Boy Steph versus Daniel Rahman, the babyface assassin. This is a very important fight, and I'm glad that Daniel Rahman is getting another crack at the title. But yeah, let me know what you think, and who would you pick if Stephen Fulton does beat Rahman, between Stephen Fulton and MJ Akhmadaliev. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.